Hi, this is Ed in San Diego, and welcome again to Global TV Talk Show. Our very special guest today, and the leader of this is Stephen Howard, based in Phoenix today, leading for sustained success. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Ed. Good morning. How's San
Yeah,
Diego?
yeah, just a beautiful day today. No humidity, sunshine. It's great.
Absolutely.
Philip Perry in South Florida. Welcome, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, welcome. All right. We have invited some other people, but they have not arrived yet. Some note takers have. So, Stephen, the topic, I didn't expect to see all the AI. I Googled AI, the meaningfulness of your topic, and I got all this stuff. It's like, wow, who writes that?
It's an important topic, Ed.
Okay, Stephen, announce the leadership question of the day.
Well, the question today is how do you communicate change? And people, particularly, I'm not talking about C-suite people necessarily, but managers, supervisors, second line leaders, they get nervous when they have to talk about change, introduce change, much like they get nervous about feedback. Unfortunately, so many people are not trained how to give feedback or share feedback properly. So they fear feedback discussions. They fear what the employee is going to say, how they're going to react. And if you walk into anything as a communicator with fear and anxiety, you're not going to do a very good job. Well, the same thing happens with change. So let's talk a little bit about how to properly communicate change.
Philip, in your 60 country leadership role, people and process, it's constant change, isn't it?
No, it is. And as Stephen was indicating, it occurs at all levels. I mean, it's not just at the senior level, it's throughout. It's at middle and also individuals throughout the organization, line staff. So that's why this topic about sustained change and get sustained success with change is important. And I've been involved in hundreds of change initiatives. So
So, uh, Stephen, I need your input on this. Uh, why is it difficult?
Well, there's the myth that people don't like change. And I call it a myth because um, if I was running a company or a department and I said, we're going to increase everyone's salary 12%, I don't think people would be upset about that. That's the kind of change people like. So people do like some change. They like change when it benefits them. The first question that comes in people's minds when a leader, and when I talk about a leader, I mean anybody who leads people at any level of the organization. When a leader introduces change, two things happen. One, the leader has been thinking about this change for a period of time. It could be hours, it could be days, it could be months. And now they've convinced themselves that this is the right thing to do. This is a good move. And so they introduce it with enthusiasm and belief and confidence, but they've spent time thinking about it. And then when the audience kind of has a blank stare looking back, like, because the first thing everyone in the audience is thinking is the WIIFN, what's in it for me? What is this change? How's this change going to impact me? Not the company, not the department, not the business unit. How's it going to impact me? And they need time to digest it. But the leader gets these blank faces and then thinks, oh my gosh, they don't like this. We're going to have pushback. And so this dichotomy of how to communicate change makes it unpalatable to many people. And that's why I still say it's a myth that people don't like change. I think people don't like the way change is communicated.
Philip, do you want to add to that?
no, I think it's right. With the communication is key. It's critical. And also the uncertainty of the change effort. And what I think people really want to know is not only what's in it for me, but how will this impact me? And that's why it needs to be communicated in a certain way. I mean, that's one of the key facets of communicating change is for people to understand the impact on them. And because people don't go into change efforts saying that this is going to be great. I'm looking forward to this. And they go in with fear and trembling and concern because they feel that it's going to disrupt their present state. So the future state is not if it's not defined, if it's not clear, people aren't going to buy into it. I think Stephen's going to talk a little bit more about the buy-in later. But,
Let me ask a question about the deliverer, the presenter of change. Can that be delegated? Should it be delegated? Or should it always come from the CEO?
No. It's often delegated. Maybe the CEO, sometimes it's not even at the CEO level. Change doesn't always happen at the CEO level. I mean, depends on the organization. When I worked for a major U.S. Bank in Asia, I was working for their Asian operations. We made a lot of our own decisions out in Asia. Our regional vice president would make decisions. My country manager would make decisions. And, we never would go back to corporate headquarters to get blessings on these. We often made change. We actually, we introduced 24-hour banking in Singapore, around the clock banking, first in the world, with live telephone officers, not even operators. We had officers who could make decisions on the phone for the customers. We didn't go to the regional vice president to do that. We didn't go to the corporate headquarters to get permission for that. We sat around a conference table in Singapore, and 8 or 9 of us decided it was a great idea, and we implemented it within 3 months.
Oh, great. So do you ask for feedback from the ranks?
You should. And so here's what I would suggest. Here's my tip for your audience, Ed, that to change the way change is communicated. And so right now, if somebody wants to implement change, typically they'll call a staff meeting for an hour, and they'll spend 15 or 20 minutes introducing the change, talking about why it's good, and usually with a lot of platitudes. Unfortunately, not a lot of specifics, which goes to the point that Philip was making. People don't know how it's going to impact the status quo. They don't know how, that what it means for them, the impact on them. But the leader always says, "Oh, this is good. This is going to be good for our customers, or this is going to be good for productivity, or this is going to be good for costs," but without the specifics there. So it's not believed necessarily. But anyway, and then you spend the next 35, 40 minutes of the meeting talking about how to implement the change. And often the leader will say something like, "What do you guys think? How can we implement this?" And again, the leader's going to get blank stares because they've just heard about the change. They haven't been able to digest the change. And now you want people to come up with instant ideas on how to implement. So here's my recommendation. Have 2 meetings. Have a meeting, say, on a Tuesday morning for 20 to 30 minutes. Introduce the change, explain it, be very specific about it, raise questions, and then ask people to think about it for 2 days. And have another meeting on Thursday or Friday about how to implement the change. Let them think about it, let them inculcate it, let them discuss it amongst themselves, so that now you can have a productive half hour or 45-minute meeting, or maybe even an hour meeting on Thursday, talking about how to implement the change. Is that easy? No, sometimes you can't get everyone together. Sometimes you have to do this remotely. Does it take more time? Perhaps, but it's going to be one of these cases where if you slow down to speed up, you slow down on the introduction of the change in the conversation around the change, then you speed up on the implementation of the change. So that's my recommendation.
So the danger is, as we've seen and this is not political, it's just what's been going on the past few months in the White House. Rapid change and then backpedaling and confusion and being told by the courts that you can't do this, and then that's going to be appealed, and people are on a paid vacation during this time?
I don't know. There's a lot of golf happening apparently for out of the White House these days, but that's the chaos. And that's a different nature. That's a different kind of leadership. It's the leadership of a country, a leadership of rules and regulations and implementing that. And in that case, you kind of have to think of the White House as a CEO and the Supreme Court as the board of directors in some cases. So, everything the CEO is trying to do is now being reviewed by the board of directors, or in this case, by the Supreme Court or federal courts, and eventually by the Supreme Court is going to end up making a lot of these decisions. So
That's an excellent analogy. Thank you very much. Philip,
Yeah.
would you like to comment or take us in a new pathway?
Yeah, I'd like to just elaborate a little more on what Stephen said in terms of I like the words of you slow down so that you can speed up later. And the meetings, I mean, there's usually a big announcement of in one way or another, but then where it becomes even more impactful is if you can break it down to smaller groups that you know are going to be impacted one way or another, and then have small um, communication sessions, and I call them listening sessions. Not, like a lot of people, they think, see, the whole notion of communicating, yeah, is again this. It starts with this top-down way of approaching stuff, but there needs to be a listening. One needs to understand what is the impact that this could have on different groups, and you do that in small groups, and then when you do meet again, what you've done in between those sessions is that you've taken that feedback to say, oh gosh, we didn't think about the impact that this would have on families. We didn't think of the impact that this would have on our products and on the West Coast or whatever. So we didn't think about the fact that there's some policies that we need to be sure that we are adhering to, and some of those are legal policies. For example, you have to have appropriate warning to individuals, and that especially in the U.S., but also in other countries also. We have to think about this on a global basis, and there are what is going to be the impact that this would have on, and are you taking into account some of the um, pieces that will impact people in a very injurious way. And so if you do that, then see the problem that we have in many organizations is that if you think about this start of a policy to eliminate a number of different jobs at the White House level. Well, but they didn't think about the impact that would have on a number of people, and they had to hire a number of people back. They had to hire them back because it wasn't thought through. I mean, that's why this whole thing. There's this U.S. way of approaching things. Let's be fast. Let's be quick. No, let's slow down so we can really do this in the right way. That's where you really get effectiveness.
And that builds trust and psychological safety.
Yeah.
Indeed, it does. And that American business attitude of time is money doesn't take into account the fact that when you have to course correct, that's also time is money. You're spending dollars down the road, but you don't think about it because you're fixing problems that you've self-created.
Oh boy, this is deep, but good.
Well,
that's for people who have been involved in real change efforts. That's what Steve and I
exactly. Yeah. Been involved in a few, still am actually. But,
yeah, right.
Definitely. But to put it in perspective, I mean, I'll just take what Philip was saying. You think that's why the team we spent, like I said, 3 months, and we tried to plan it too. We didn't think of everything. I'm sure there's a couple things that went wrong, but we had to talk about you know, the compensation for having officers working, midnight to 8 a.m. in the morning.
Mm.
We had to talk about, how do we staff in case what's our backup plan in case of we get overloaded. I mean, we only staff 3 or 4 officers at night, but what happens if the phones really start ringing and we need more people? How do you call in? So, and so when you think about this, and this is another problem with change is that too many organizations think they have to have the answers internally. One of the things I did to talk about that situation there is myself and our branch manager, we went and met with an administrator of a hospital to talk about how did they staff the emergency room and what were the issues they had and how did they have them. And they're the ones who told us about, well, have people on call. And we go, God, we didn't think about that. And do you pay them? And we discussed that, whether we give them just compensation for being on call, like, and what do they have to do? We're going to put them on call. We're going to pay them a little bit, but they're not going to be able to drink because we don't want somebody coming in, even though it's only on the phone, who's had a few, glasses of wine at dinner time. That's acceptable. They're adults, but we don't want to call that person in to have a conversation about financial transactions with one of our customers. So you got to think these things through. What is the impact here on a whole bunch of stuff? And trying to implement change too quickly is what causes so many course corrections, causes so many errors. And it goes back to what Philip says, that American attitude of time, time is money and we got to do it quickly. We've decided, now we have to implement it. Well, you take 3 months deciding something, you might want to take at least 50% of that time, 6 weeks to implement it. Not 6 days or 6 hours.
And in addition to what Steve is saying, is that one needs to consider that any change effort that you are undertaking is not just affecting the organization that you're in. And this is what, like, I've worked for profit and non-for-profit organizations. And so there's always the individuals who are the recipients of your services, whether you call them clients, patients or customers. What you have to think about the external impact on those cohorts and how will it impact them? And what do you need to consider, from the standpoint of service delivery, product delivery, and product and continued customer service. I mean, so those are other important things in a change effort. People just think it's just, I mean, when I think about this effort, you brought in place this Doge thing, and they didn't think very, that they wanted to get credit for being quick and out there, and let's just do this right away. Let's just rip it off, and then let's say it's done. I mean, well, without thinking, what's the impact on so many other external factors?
That's very true.
Uh,
And Philip
yes.
mentioned buy-in earlier. Can I talk a little bit about what I call, not what I call, but what's called the buy-in continuum and how it impacts change?
Absolutely. I thought that AI stuff that I found was really interesting. Hello, Ron.
Hey, Ron.
Hey, thank you. I apologize for being late and having problems getting joined in.
Yeah, well, I've had problems too, but because I didn't open up my camera. So welcome. So we're having a conversation about decision making and communicating change in an organization. And it's really interesting stuff. Stephen is about to talk about the buy-in continuum.
So is you seeing it on your screen there?
Yes.
So this is a modified version of it. You'll find all kinds of versions if you do an internet or an AI search on it. I try and structure this fairly simply for people, for audiences that I talk to. So, when, in the middle, it's kind of a 5-point scale. In the middle is acceptance. People accept the buy-in, but at the lower end, it's hostility and dissent. And the key difference between hostility and dissent is that someone who's hostile to change in an organization typically walks around bad-mouthing it. whispers in other people's ears or talks to them and say, hey, we don't want to do this. Is crazy. Let's not do this. Let's just keep our head down and they'll change their mind later. Same stuff, different month type thing. We're always having, this is the flavor of the month. And they talk negative about it. They try and get people on their side to kill the project or shortchange it or slow it down, whatever they can. Dissent is they don't like it. They just not happy about it. I'm going to do it, but I'm not happy. Acceptance is merely, I'm going to do it because you're the boss. I get paid. I clock in, I clock out. I'll do it. But you're not going to get anything more from me other than the bare minimum. You tell me exactly what I have to do and I'm going to deliver it. And then the next level is support, where people try it out or they support the idea, or mentally, cognitively think, hey, this could be good. Let's give this a try, and they support it. And then at buy-in, it's the opposite of hostility. When you get people to buy into it, they almost become evangelistic about it. They talk it up. They talk it up in meetings. They talk it up to their peers. Hey, no, this is good. Hey, you should really try this in your department. Hey, this is really great. This has saved us money, or it's created team camaraderie, or whatever it's done, or the customers are really happy with this change. So that's the continuum. Now, here's the problem, is that leaders try to move someone from dissent to support or buy-in. And I suggest you can't do that. You can only move someone one step at a time along this continuum. You got someone who's hostile, move them to dissent. Basically, you want to keep them from bad-mouthing. You're not going to convince them it's a great idea. You just got to need to convince them from trying to sabotage it. You got somebody who's at the dissent level. You can't get them to support it overnight. Get them to at least accept it, reluctantly accept it, implement it, try it, and so on. So the problem is people try to move team members who are hostile or dissent up to support or buy-in, overnight or in one meeting or in one conversation, and it doesn't happen. So my advice is one step along the buy-in continuum or the buy-in ladder at a time. It's going to work a lot. Does it take more time? Yes, it takes more time, but at least it works. If you try and force people into support, you're going to get pushback. And sometimes you've got someone whose acceptance level and you try to force them into buy-in, it backfires and they start dissenting or start becoming hostile to it, because now you're trying to force something down their throat that they only barely, reluctantly accepted in the first place. So those are some thoughts I wanted to share with your audience.
Well, thank you very much. Ron Cooper, I welcome your opinion on this idea of how to communicate change, and your experience, longtime experience as a military leader, that has a force behind it. And business is a force behind it, but it doesn't seem to be the same thing. Am I clear about what I'm trying to say, Ron? That how do you get buy-in without being dictatorial? Oh, I can't hear you.
Ed, can you hear me now?
Yes, right now.
All right. Stephen, I agree with what you're saying. You can only move people incrementally. However, if people are in a hostile environment and they represent an element of toxicity in your organization, my opinion is you have to ensure they are moving. They do want to move. You're doing what you can to reason with them. But if they remain where they are and they attempt to influence others to undermine what you're doing, I think you need to make a very difficult decision to identify whether this person aligns with your company values. But I do believe it is a matter of, as a leader, wanting to work with your people. And I think it's a matter of explaining what the change is about and how the change can benefit the company and then ultimately them. That's my approach to this. And with that approach, and I'm willing to talk with and work with them, my hope is I'll be able to, if I could use the term, win over those who are less than evangelistically supportive of the change.
Stephen?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got I'm going to share that back with you. Only because there is, when I present this to leaders, there is another. This is what I suggest is the key to what I call buy-in boosters, and it goes with Ron just what he talked about. How do you make sure that you clearly define what the goals and objectives are of this change, and what's the likelihood of implementation, and is there visible management support for this change, not just your manager, but above your manager? And I say those first three because too often in organizations, but particularly large organization, it's just one change initiative after another. It's just like I said earlier, it's the flavor of the month. So you've got to convince people that this is actually going to happen. Um, does it make sense from a business point of view? Is there a clear focus on a customer, whether that's an internal or external customer? How's it impact the person? What are going to be the personal rewards for it? The other thing is ongoing communication. Again, too often people communicate change once and then expect everyone to buy into it or to accept it. And effective communication is based on frequency. You got to keep getting that message out. You can't just tell people in one meeting why it's good for them, why it's good for the customer, why it's good for the company. You got to keep re-emphasizing that. And how are you going to track progress so that you can show down the road that the change did work, or if it didn't work, then that is your justification for course correcting it. So just some ideas there to talk about how to communicate the change and move people up the buy-in continuum.
Philip?
No, I think that's right on, Stephen. I certainly endorse everything you're saying. My experience is frequently people don't mind change. They strongly resist being changed. In other words, go ahead and change your organization if you want, but I am not going to change. In my experience is that is where a lot of the resistance comes in. But I do want to do everything I can to reason with people and explain to them why the change is being made and how they can benefit from that. And even if they're adversely affected by it, I explain all this to them with the hope that I can get buy-in from them. But even with that, that won't necessarily occur. And I again believe you have to have those in your sphere of influence who share your values.
The buy-in, I agree with what you're saying, Ron, and I love the 12 buy-in boosters that Steve presented, because all of those pieces have to occur. And you have to, in order to move along that continuum, so that way you really have true adherence to the change and acceptance, and you need to have individuals that there's constant communicating and listening to people. I mean, I just want to reemphasize that communicating is not just telling people this is how it's going to be good for you, but also listening to understand what the issues might occur with people, so that way you can come back with great information and with remedies, to assist people. And also, it might be that, see, sometimes you have to be consistent also, because sometimes individuals they don't hear it at first. They don't hear everything. So you can't inundate them with a lot of stuff and then expect that they're going to get it. So because what they're dealing with is what they're really saying is that what this person is telling me, not that I'm going to change, but that they're going to put me out of a job and this is going to impact me. They don't, matter of fact, that the ears begin to clog up at a certain point. And that's why being able to sit down with them in smaller groups also is good, because you don't want to get this type of behavior, collective behavior, where people are after the meetings, at the end of the day, people will go to their coffee or drinking place, and then that's where they begin to really talk about what they're feeling. And you want that information. You want to be a part of that conversation in some way or another. So that way you get the real scoop from people.
No, and Philip, I agree with that. And in the context of having a psychologically safe space, a culture of our company, we want to certainly offer any dissenting opinions in the context that, well, how can I make this change better than what it is? I do believe that every person, every process can be improved. If I am open to dialogue and the person with whom I'm communicating that agree that, yep, this product can be improved, or at least I will give you a fair assessment, then I think we've been fair to each other. And if I choose not to implement whatever your recommended change is, I'm going to give you the benefit of my wisdom that I've opted not to adopt your recommendation because, but I want that person to know that I at least fairly assessed what the recommendation is, and I appreciate the input, but I've chosen not to implement that, and I'm accountable for the decision I just made. And I want that, hopefully I can articulate that in a way that does not come across as being autocratic, resolved, but not in an autocratic way to where I'm speaking down to those within my organization.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of sum all that up is you reach higher buy-in from people when you engage them in how to implement something. They don't need to be involved. Not everyone can be involved in the decision making of the change. For instance, what's happening almost everywhere today. We're gonna use AI in our organization. Great, that's a change. Now, at the department level, let's talk about how we're going to implement AI. What are we going to use it for? Who's going to be the lead on AI? How's it going to be an efficient tool for us? And then how are we going to implement it within our department? Get the team talking about that, how to implement AI, not the fact that it's going to be that we're going to use it, but how to implement it. And then as you do that discussion, I always ask two questions in those discussions around change, particularly if I'm dealing with the frontline people who are going to implement the change. After explaining the change and hearing their thoughts on it, the two questions are, what am I missing? What are the opportunities that I don't see that this change might bring us? Because here I see A, B, C, and D because that's why I'm implementing the change. That's why I'm recommending we do the change. But what do you see? And then secondly, what are the hurdles that you see? I see that a couple things here. It could be, we have to change an HR policy. The hurdle, we may need to get legal, in the example from earlier, we had to go and get permission from the Monetary Authority of Singapore to implement this change. And we got that within a day because they had no objection to it, but we had to go get that because it was talking about financial transactions. And we had to clarify to them that any transactions that took place any transaction took place after 3 p.m. in the afternoon until 8 o'clock the next morning would be transacted on the following business day. That was their only concern. So, they have to make sure all the banks have the right money in their accounts. So, but there were other hurdles we didn't think of as a management team. And when we introduced this and started talking with it to our customer service people and our other officers, they identified 2 or 3 other things that we hadn't. Okay, how do we overcome those obstacles? Great. And one of them was the one I mentioned earlier about staffing if it gets overloaded. We did not think about that. That was brought up by one of our customer service people. And then that's when myself and our branch manager went to talk to the hospital administrator about how do they staff the emergency rooms when, they get overloaded and, suddenly get lots of people coming in to the emergency room. And we implemented their techniques. So it's communication. Philip's absolutely right. It's all about communicating, two-way dialoguing around the situation.
I'm glad that I'm glad Stephen mentioned Singapore, because when you are implementing change in different countries, you have to be aware of the cultural context that you're operating in. the cultural context of the people who are communicating it, who might come from a position of, boy, this is the most efficient and effective way. Boy, let's make sure we get the message out to people. Let's tell them this is what we're going to do. This is when we're going to do it, and keep going forward. However, for populations, on a culture dynamic that who will try to implement what you're doing, they'll say that they're going to implement it, but then what will happen is that they may find that they can't do it, and then they won't do it because it really doesn't fit them, because you didn't ask them about some critical issues around the impact of certain things. I remember working in Egypt with a certain situation. We were launching a product, and boy, we had everybody around the table, and these were some we figured, oh boy, they're US educated. We're going to outline everything on a nice critical path with a PERT chart and everything. And it's going to have dates and responsibilities and everything. And then we're going to move forward. And then two of the people, because they may be educated in the England or in the US, but then one of the people said, I said, okay, we ready to go with this? And they said, Inshallah, if God wills it. So that is a whole different context. It has a whole different flavor to it, in terms of trying to make sure that people understand and that they buy into it. And that deeper belief and value system in terms of how that guides them along the way is really what determines what their behavior and actions is going to be. And you need to understand that, and you need to listen to people, so that way, and that's why the piece that Stephen talked about earlier, I go back to that, is like hurry up and slow down, or
Slow down to speed up.
yeah,
The other,
thank you. Slow down and speed, so that way you can speed up later. And slowing down is important, so that way you have time in even smaller groups where you can get people, like 3-on-1 or something like that, to get people into those groups where they will talk about the impact on them, and then you can come in with different solutions that can meet their needs and make them more comfortable with it, to move them along the continuum. What you want to do, the goal is to move them along the continuum. That continuum chart, in fact, is more important than, and going up that ladder to that, more important than any other timelines that you can put in place.
Philip, when I first introduced that to one of the people I coach, and I'm still coaching this individual like 2.5 years later, I sent him that slide, and he printed it out, and he has it taped above his computer he miniaturized it, and he's taped it above his computer, and he still has it today, 2.5 years later. And every time somebody comes along his office, he's like, see, you got to get him up the buy-in continuum. He's become my evangelist inside that company for the buy-in continuum.
Yeah.
Because he's bought into it.
Yeah, exactly.
To what extent, Philip and Stephen and Ron, if he's in the background there, is hospitality training, people service, making people comfortable in order to enact that change?
When you say I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, hospitality approach is taking care of people, getting people comfortable in order to establish rapport and ask them to do something different.
I mean,
I think it backfires, Ed, in many cases. Sorry, Phil. I think it
Well, no,
backfires
please go.
in many cases, in that what happens in an organization when you want to communicate change, you call the meeting and you bring in snack food for everybody, and drinks and little refreshments, and you're trying to do that. I think you establish the comfortable level through trust and authenticity, your behaviors, and being open and say, look, we've thought of many things. But I want to hear from you. What haven't we thought of? in when we implement this. I mean, so you approach it not that we're telling you we're thinking about implementing this. We want your feedback. No, we're going to implement this. We want your feedback on how to implement it. You know, we've made a decision's been made. This is a new strategy or a new tactic or whatever. Now we need your input on how to implement it and how comfortable. How long do you think? We think it'll take this period of time. You might think it takes shorter or longer. Let's get your input on it. And move them up that buy-in continuum through your discussions. But you can't have that false hospitality approach of we're gonna give you an hour off to think about this type thing. No, we got a business to run. We need your input.
I remember to add to the point that Steve is making, and that is that I especially think about different cultures that I've worked in. I was working with an issue in Turkey, and so while the head matriarch was really in favor of the process, but there are a number of people who were in the organization who were not in favor, and it took some time. We had to really spend some time with people so that way, and Stephen mentioned a really important word, trust. That people have to trust that what you're doing, and in fact, with this particular situation that I was working in with a merger between two companies, they eventually accepted it after a little period of time. Because they trusted that we were going to take care of their employees the same way that they were taking care of their employees, from the standpoint of like them being a family. I mean, that was what made the difference. It's the trust. And so you have to have enough behaviors in place that show that, it doesn't come with, and yeah, you're going to make the change, but is this something that is going, show me how it's going to be good, and tell people how it's going to be good, inform them so that way they can understand that.
We have about 5 minutes remaining. And Stephen, the floor is yours.
I don't really know what to add to this. This change is something that's constant. It's something it's really important. As I mentioned earlier, just AI alone is one of the changes that most businesses are facing today and trying to understand the impact of artificial intelligence. But again, we've got the global trade policies impacting people, tariffs impacting the cost of goods, whether, that could impact somebody who's just doing business on a local basis, but their raw products might be subject to tariffs and the uncertainty around that, the uncertainty around the economy, the uncertainty around the independence of the Federal Reserve Board to make decisions on interest rates. All these things are impacting people's minds, and they're all changes that we're facing. So I go back to the importance of communicating the what's in it for you factor to the employees that are on your team members, and then giving them time to think about it before you ask them how to implement it. So having those two separate discussions, one discussion about this is the change. These are the details of it. These are what we see as the benefits of it as your leadership team. Now take a couple of days to think about it, discuss it amongst yourselves, because they're going to do it anyway. It's not like you're giving permission, as they say. They're going to go run to the coffee room or the drinking slot or outside in the park, the car park. They're going to talk about it anyway. So tell them, go talk about it. And let's meet again in a couple of days and let's have a discussion about how to implement it and what you see as some opportunities that we haven't identified, and what do you see as some hurdles that we haven't identified. And you'll get people up that buy-in continuum a lot quicker with that approach. And you will successfully implement the change as well, a lot quicker.
Exactly.
So slow down to speed up.
Yeah.
Good words. Thank you guys for doing this.
My pleasure.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it was nice because it was a topic where Steve and I and Ron also, when you have experience in these situations, years of experience, the words come easily in terms of being able to address it. This,
Yeah,
this
and
is it's not an
the sad
academic thing.
and the sad thing is, I'm sure you're experiencing it in your consulting life, Philip, is that the issues we faced 20 years ago in our corporate lives are the same issues people are facing today. And it's like,
Yeah,
I can help you not butt your head against the wall so hard.
right.
Let me walk you through this thing. But people, because there's a lack of training around this, there's a lack of communication around this, and people are just doing it the same way over and over and over again and making the same mistakes over and
Yeah,
over again.
exactly.
And, as Yoda said, Yoda, my favorite leadership philosopher, said, you have to unlearn what you've learned. And this is what today's leaders need to do. Unlearn what you've learned about communicating change and learn some new ways of doing it.
Mhm.
And with that, next chapter. Stay
Hmm.
tuned. Thank
All
you.
right.
Okay.
Thanks, Ed.
Really,
Thanks,
really good seeing both of you, Steve.